There are some voices that feel like coming home. They're warm, familiar, and wrapped in a sense of comforting nostalgia. For a whole generation, the voice of Rosemary Clooney was exactly that. It was the sound of wholesome, all-American optimism, a voice as clear and reassuring as a Sunday morning. She was the girl next door, the cheerful singer on the radio, the star of the silver screen, who danced with Bing Crosby in White Christmas. Her life from the outside looked like a fairy tale, but fairy tales, as we know, often have a dark side. Behind that perfect smile and that honey-smooth voice was a woman battling demons few could have imagined. Her life wasn't a straight line to success. It was a roller coaster of dizzying highs and terrifying lows. She faced crippling addiction, a devastating public mental breakdown, and personal betrayals that would have shattered anyone. But the most remarkable part of Rosemary Clooney's story isn't how she fell. It's how she got back up, pieced herself back together, and found her true voice in the wreckage. This is the story of the woman behind the music, a story of survival, resilience, and the quiet courage it takes to reclaim your own life. To understand Rosemary Clooney, you have to picture the world she came from. She was born in 1928 in Maysville, Kentucky, a small town nestled on the banks of the Ohio River. This was America between the wars, a country grappling with the Great Depression and on the cusp of another global conflict. Life was hard, and for the Clooney family it was harder than most. Her father, Andrew, was a house painter with a charming personality and a devastating addiction to alcohol. He was often out of work and frequently disappeared for long stretches, leaving his wife Frances to raise Rosemary, her sister Betty, and her brother Nick on her own. The children learned early on that they could only truly rely on each other. Music was their escape. From a very young age, Rosemary and Betty sang in perfect harmony, their voices blending together with an almost magical quality. They sang for family, at church, and eventually for local political rallies, earning a few dollars here and there to help make ends meet. Their grandfather, the mayor of Maysville, recognized their talent and encouraged them. Singing wasn't just a passion, it was a lifeline, a way to bring a little bit of beauty into a childhood marked by instability and poverty. When Rosemary was just 13, her mother left to chase a new life in California, taking her brother Nick with her. A short time later, their father, in a fit of drunken despair, abandoned Rosemary and Betty, leaving them to fend for themselves. The two teenage sisters were utterly alone. They bounced between relatives, scraping by, their bond forged in the fires of abandonment. It was in this crucible of hardship that Rosemary developed the fierce determination and the deep-seated vulnerability that would define the rest of her life. She decided then and there that she would be a singer, not just because she loved it, but because she had to. It was the only way out she could see. The late 1940s were the golden age of the big bands, and for a talented female vocalist, the role of the girl singer was a golden ticket. In 1945, when Rosemary was just 18, she and Betty auditioned for a spot on a Cincinnati radio station. They were an instant hit. Soon after, they caught the ear of bandleader Tony Pastor, who hired them to tour with his orchestra. Suddenly, the two girls from Maysville were on the road, living a life of one-night gigs in smoky ballrooms across the country. It was grueling, but it was also a dream come true. They were professionals, earning a steady paycheck and making a name for themselves as the charming Clooney sisters. The sister act, however, was not destined to last. It soon became clear that Rosemary had a special star quality, a unique connection with the audience that set her apart. In 1949, she took a leap of faith and went solo, signing a contract with Columbia Records. Her early recordings were respectable, but they weren't blockbusters. She was a good singer, But in a crowded field, she needed something to make her stand out. That something arrived in 1951, and it was a song that would make her a household name, a song she absolutely despised. The song was called Come On to My House. It was a novelty tune written by Ross Bagdasarian and the famous author William Saroyan, filled with a fake, vaguely Armenian accent and nonsensical lyrics. The head of Columbia Records, the legendary Mitch Miller, was convinced it would be a smash hit. Rosemary thought it was ridiculous. She found it silly, demeaning, and musically moronic. She fought him tooth and nail, but Miller was relentless. He threatened to ruin her career if she didn't record it. A young singer with little power, she reluctantly gave in. She recorded the song in a single angry take, her frustration palpable in the almost aggressive energy of her performance. To her astonishment, Mitch Miller was right. The song was an absolute sensation. It shot to number 1 on the charts and stayed there for weeks. It sold over 1 million copies. Rosemary Clooney was suddenly one of the biggest stars in the country. The success was dizzying, but it was also bittersweet. She had become famous for a song that she felt misrepresented her as an artist. It was the first of many compromises she would make in her career, trading a piece of her artistic integrity for a taste of stardom. Novelty hits like Mambo Italiano and This Ole House followed, cementing her image as a purveyor of fun, upbeat, but ultimately disposable pop music. Hollywood inevitably came calling. She signed with Paramount Pictures, starring in a string of light-hearted musicals. Her most iconic role, of course, was in the 1954 holiday classic White Christmas, alongside Bing Crosby, Danny Kaye, and Vera Ellen. She played Betty Haynes, one half of the Haynes sisters, a role that mirrored her own start in the business. The film was a massive success and remains beloved to this day, immortalizing Rosemary as the wholesome girl-next-door sweetheart. It was during the ups and downs of her musical career in the early 1950s that she met the man who would become her great love and the source of her greatest heartache, actor and director, Jose Ferrer. Ferrer, born in Puerto Rico in 1912, was a Hollywood icon, distinguished by his versatile talents. He was not only an actor of stage and film, but also a director and producer with a refined, charismatic, intellectually compelling style. He won the 1950 Academy Award for Best Actor for his portrayal of Cyrano de Bergerac in the film of the same name, a role that required a perfect blend of romantic drama and complex acting techniques, cementing his status as an icon of the Broadway stage and Hollywood screen. Short in stature, but attractive in appearance, Ferrer was 16 years Clooney's senior, and he was known as a womanizer with a complicated love life. Before meeting Clooney, he had gone through 2 failed marriages to Phyllis Hill and Uta Hagen, and had children from a previous marriage. Ferrer's temperament was described as complex, often difficult, and irritable, partly due to the pressures of his career and his sensitive artistic nature, which led to him getting into heated arguments. Rosemary, then 25, was completely captivated by Ferrer's intelligence, talent, and charisma. She shared in her autobiography, This for Remembrance, that he represented the sophistication she craved, far from her humble background in Maysville, Kentucky. They began a whirlwind, passionate affair. They met through Hollywood events and quickly fell in love. That led to their first wedding on July 13th, 1953 in Durant, Oklahoma, a low-key affair that quickly made headlines for its pairing of pop star and movie icon. Their marriage was tumultuous from the start, reflecting the clash of 2 strong personalities, both at the height of their careers and unwilling to compromise. Clooney, with her sweet voice and girl-next-door image, was dominating the music charts and starring in films like White Christmas with Bing Crosby, while Ferrer was busy with stage and film projects, often away from home due to filming schedules. Their life was a mixture of intense passion, romantic moments, mutual support in their careers, and explosive conflict, often stemming from jealousy, cultural differences, and the pressures of fame. They had 5 children in 5 years. However, family life did not alleviate the drama. On the contrary, it exacerbated it, as Clooney had to balance her roles as a mother, a touring singer, and the wife of a husband who frequently cheated on her. Ferrer's frequent affairs, which included relationships with actresses and other women, left Clooney in a state of constant jealousy and insecurity. He even openly admitted to his fickle nature in later interviews. The couple's quarrels became legendary in Hollywood, with tabloids such as Confidential and Photoplay exploiting them, describing them as a couple who were madly in love but also destructive. They first divorced in 1961 after 8 years of tumultuous marriage, but remarried on November 22, 1964, in Los Angeles, hoping to save their relationship. However, just 3 years later, in 1967, they divorced for the final time when Clooney discovered Ferrer's affair with Stella Magee. Their tumultuous relationship was exposed in the pages of tabloid magazines, not only damaging her public image, but also contributing to the decline of Clooney's career as the rise of rock and roll pushed her to the margins. The pressures of her career, her tumultuous marriage, and the demands of motherhood began to take a serious toll on her mental health. To cope with the stress and exhaustion, particularly after childbirth and postpartum depression, Rosemary began taking sleeping pills. It started innocently enough, a pill to help her sleep after a late-night gig, a tranquilizer to calm her before a stressful performance, but soon she was dependent on them, increasing her dosage to maintain her bright public appearance. Her addiction grew silently, a dark undercurrent beneath the image of America's sweetheart, where she smiled on stage but was silently crumbling inside, leading to deepening isolation and a sense of loss of control. The tipping point came on June 5, 1968. Rosemary was a fervent supporter and close friend of Senator Robert F. Kennedy. She was at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles that night, working on his presidential campaign, celebrating his victory in the California primary. She was just a few feet away when an assassin shot him dead. She heard the gunshots, witnessed the chaos, and was trapped in the horrific, tragic aftermath. The shock of that night shattered her already fragile psyche. It was the catalyst that set off years of pain, anxiety, and repressed grief. A few weeks later, she performed at a casino in Reno, Nevada. She took the stage, but instead of singing, she began rambling, incoherently, screaming at the audience and her bandmates. It was a horrific public mental breakdown. She fled the stage, got into her car, and started driving erratically on the wrong side of a mountain road, convinced that she was being followed. The police eventually found her in a full-blown psychotic episode. The fairy tale was officially over. The aftermath of the breakdown was a journey into hell. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and admitted to the psychiatric ward of St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. It was 1968, an era when mental illness was deeply misunderstood and stigmatized. Psychiatric wards were often dark, terrifying places. Rosemary found herself trapped in a world of padded cells, straitjackets, and electroshock therapy. She had been stripped of her glamorous identity and became just another patient, lost in a haze of paranoia and medication. She later described this period with harrowing honesty in her autobiography. She wrote about the terror of losing her mind, the humiliation of her confinement, and the moments of profound despair. One of the most striking and little-known facts from this time is how she was treated by some of the staff. A nurse, recognizing the famous singer, cruelly taunted her, saying, "Well, look what we have here, Miss Rosemary Clooney. You're not so big now, are you?" It was a moment of profound degradation that underscored just how far she had fallen. Yet even in that dark place, there were glimmers of light. Her friends, the ones who truly mattered, did not abandon her. Bing Crosby, her old friend and co-star, was a constant source of support. He visited her regularly, talking to her for hours, reminding her of the woman she was and could be again. He told her voice, "Rosemary, you have a talent. You can't just throw it away." His steadfast belief in her was a crucial anchor. Singers like Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra also reached out, offering support and encouragement. The 8 years she spent in psychoanalysis were a grueling process of self-discovery. She had to confront the traumas of her childhood, the abandonment by her parents, the poverty, the deep-seated fear of being alone. She had to untangle the damage from her toxic marriage to Ferrer, and she had to come to terms with her addiction and her mental illness. It was a slow, painful, and deeply courageous journey back to herself. For years, she didn't sing a note. She was convinced that the voice, the very thing that had defined her, was gone forever. The world, for the most part, had written her off as another tragic Hollywood casualty. But they had underestimated the resilience of the girl from Maysville, Kentucky. In 1976, her old friend Bing Crosby was planning a 50th anniversary concert. He asked Rosemary to join him on stage for a duet. She was terrified. She hadn't performed in years. She was overweight, insecure, and convinced she would fail. But she couldn't say no to Bing. She walked out on that stage. The applause was thunderous. And when she opened her mouth to sing, the old magic was still there. But it was different now. The voice that had once been bright and cheerful now had a new depth, a new resonance. It was colored by experience, by pain, by survival. The audience heard it, and they were mesmerized. It was the beginning of one of the most remarkable second acts in the history of American music. The comeback of Rosemary Clooney was not about chasing pop stardom. It was about reclaiming her artistic soul. She turned her back on the novelty hits and embraced the music she had always loved, the great American Songbook. She reinvented herself as a world-class jazz and cabaret singer. She signed with Concord Records, a small jazz label, and began recording a series of critically acclaimed albums. Her new musical style was a revelation. Freed from the constraints of pop music, her interpretations of songs by Cole Porter, the Gershwins, and Irving Berlin were masterful. She wasn't just singing the lyrics, she was inhabiting them. When she sang a ballad of heartbreak, you could hear the raw, authentic pain of her own experiences. When she sang a joyful swing number, you could hear the hard-won appreciation for life's simple pleasures. Jazz critic Nat Hentoff wrote that she had become one of the most sensitive and compelling jazz singers of our time. She had finally become the artist she was always meant to be. Her personal life also found a new, quieter stability. She reconnected with an old flame from her Hollywood days, a dancer named Dante DiPaolo. They had dated briefly before she met Ferrer. They fell back in love and remained together, devoted partners, for the rest of her life. He provided the steady, unconditional love she had always craved. The biggest controversy of Rosemary's life, her mental breakdown, ultimately became a source of strength and a platform for advocacy. In 1977, she published her first autobiography, This for Remembrance, in which she wrote with unflinching honesty about her struggles with addiction and bipolar disorder. At a time when celebrities kept such matters hidden in shame, her candor was revolutionary. She became one of the first major public figures to speak openly about mental illness, helping to destigmatize the subject for millions. She worked tirelessly as an activist, lobbying for better mental health care and greater public understanding. Her bravery in sharing her story gave countless others the courage to seek help. Her marriage to José Ferrer remains a complex and debated part of her legacy. To many, he was the villain of her story, the man whose cruelty and philandering drove her over the edge. Rosemary herself painted a complicated picture of him. While she acknowledged the deep pain he caused her, she also admitted that she never stopped loving him in some way. They shared 5 children and a history that could never be erased. Their story is a powerful, if painful, reminder that love and hurt can be inextricably intertwined, and that human relationships are rarely as simple as black and white. Her impact can be felt in several profound ways. First and foremost, there is the music. Her recordings, especially from her comeback years, are timeless treasures. She is remembered not just as a 1950s pop star, but as one of the finest interpreters of American popular song. Singers to this day study her phrasing, her warmth, and her incredible ability to tell a story through song. She continued to perform and record with new depth and sincerity until late 2001, when she was diagnosed with lung cancer, a heartbreaking consequence of a lifetime of heavy smoking. After surgery and a brief battle with the disease, Rosemary Clooney died peacefully on June 29, 2002, at her home in Beverly Hills at the age of 74. Her passing left a huge void in the music world. The news of her death was not only the end of an illustrious career, but also the end of an inspiring story of survival and rebirth. Major newspapers and television channels devoted articles and special programs to mourn and honor her. They not only celebrated the smooth, soulful voice that defined a generation, but also highlighted her extraordinary journey from the heights of fame through the depths of mental illness and back again, stronger than ever. For fans, it was a deeply personal loss. Many had grown up listening to her hits in the 1950s and found deep resonance in her later reflective jazz recordings. They lost not just a singer, but a musical soulmate, someone who used her own scars to create art. Across forums and radio shows, fans shared memories, how her songs had been part of their lives, and expressed admiration not only for her talent but also for her courage. She was laid to rest in her hometown, attended by family and many stars, including her famous nephew George Clooney, who always considered her one of the greatest influences in his life. Her legacy as a mental health advocate is equally important. By having the courage to speak her truth, she helped change the conversation around mental illness in America. She demonstrated that a diagnosis of bipolar disorder was not a life sentence, and that recovery and a fulfilling life were possible. She was a pioneer, paving the way for the many public figures who have since opened up about their own mental health struggles. In the end, Rosemary Clooney's life was not a fairy tale, but something far more real and inspiring. It was a story of a survivor, a woman who was handed fame and fortune, who had it all stripped away, and who found the strength to build a new life on her own terms. She faced the darkest parts of herself and the judgment of the world, and she emerged not just intact, but stronger, wiser, and more artistically profound than ever before.